You know what I noticed? The bar is so low for comic book movies right now that people are actually praising them for the same reasons that they used to hate them. People will say the most ridiculous things to prop up a movie that is very clearly messy and rushed in its execution. Even the cape messiah himself, Kevin Feige, has lost the plot. Marvel and DC deserve better. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
One bit of praise that I have consistently heard about James Gunn's Superman is how it has the appearance of being ripped right out of the comics. Something that actually didn't benefit the film in some people's eyes. And before you go all fanboy and tell me to read a comic, let me explain.
You about to cross some lines.
Guys,
For the 100th time, comics are a completely different medium than movies and should be treated as such. You can reference comics, you can pay homage to the source material you are adapting. Hell, you can even borrow entire scenes from the page and rework them into a memorable cinematic moment. But to cinematically drop your audience in the middle of a pre-established cinematic universe, without context, without explanation, without reason other than the fact that you are clearly trying to fast-track the MCU 2.0. At the end of the day, I don't think I'm out of bounds here when I say it is not beneficial to the overall quality of your one individual film. Now, it may look like a comic because of how vibrant and how full of characters it is. But the proper cinematic steps, the proper storytelling steps, were not taken to establish this universe ahead of time.
It's true.
And this is something that the MCU actually used to do pretty well. But DC and WB have never quite been able to crack that code due to their own impatience. To me, looking like a comic book panel is not enough. The movie also has to be cinematically appealing from a world-building perspective, from a story perspective, from a dialogue perspective, from a cinematography perspective, and even from an acting perspective. There are so many more factors to me that go into making a great movie as opposed to a great comic book. When you are making a movie, you are not making content for a niche audience like you are when you're making comics. Comic fans already have a vast knowledge, in most cases, about who these characters are and how these worlds operate. So a ton of setup isn't always necessary when a new person comes in and takes over a comic story. But when dealing with the general public and trying to appeal to them with a movie, you are trying to appeal to a completely different animal.
That makes sense.
And not to mention, you also have film critics to contend with when you bring these characters and stories into a new medium. And I'm not talking about the hand-picked critics who get to see these movies early every single time they come out. No, I'm talking about real critics who are looking at and critiquing films based on their filmmaking qualities. Critics care more about how the story flows, how a director executes his visual style, how the characters and the world are established and executed. Just having a movie look and feel like a comic book panel is never going to be enough for someone like me. Because to me, this type of philosophy has never and will never equate to making a good movie. We also have to take into consideration that some things in comics just do not translate well to live action. Liberties sometimes need to be taken cinematically as long as they do not disrupt the very essence of the thing you are adapting.
because it's all part of the plan.
As you can see, based on everything I've said here today, making a great comic book adaptation requires a talented filmmaker who understands the strengths and weaknesses of bringing the source material into a new medium. And this not only applies to filmmakers, by the way, it applies to producers as well. That's why I say sometimes it's better for producers to just hire someone creative and get the hell out of the way. And this is something in particular that, despite its success, that the MCU has never done really well. But that hasn't stopped many studios, producers, and filmmakers from trying to replicate that MCU formula. And usually they fail at doing so. Which is exactly where we find ourselves today in this friendly Marvel vs. DC rivalry. And make no mistake about it, they are definitely competing with each other, But that hasn't stopped one Kevin Feige from coming out and praising James Gunn's Superman, but the way that he does it raises some red flags. Kevin Feige, when speaking with Deadline, says he really enjoyed Superman, saying, quote, "I love that you just jump right into it. You don't know who Mr. Terrific is? Tough, you'll figure it out. This is a fully fleshed out world. David Corenswet, the new Superman, he was awesome." First of all, I find it really interesting that one of Kevin Feige's biggest takeaways from this film is easily one of its biggest flaws. Either he is intentionally trying to bring attention to this flaw through shallow praise, or he is not the creative genius that some people make him out to be, and it is entirely possible that it is both of those. Let us not forget that under Kevin Feige's watch recently, the MCU has had some issues of its own. I mean, there was a report within the last couple of days that a new writer had just been hired to work on the Avengers Doomsday script, a movie that's already been shooting for a couple of months now. Doesn't really say much for this notion that Marvel is trying to right the ship creatively now, does it?
Something very familiar about all this.
So now what we have is our resident slot merchant praising the new DC film that is desperately trying to replicate what he does. I want you all to think back to just a few short years ago when the narrative was that every character in these movies needed to be introduced in their own solo movie first. Just do it like Marvel does it. And if you didn't do that, then that was considered a bad film, and it was considered rushed. The hypocrisy that I see Kevin Feige as well as a lot of fanboys displaying every single day on social media is very telling. Why is it suddenly okay, or even praised, when a multitude of characters are thrown into the middle of a new movie without proper introduction?
I don't get it.
And this is why I say the bar is so low. The goalpost has literally been moved. People are not consistent with their praise or criticism from project to project, and the reaction to James Gunn's Superman proves that. People are suddenly abandoning their whole belief system, Feige included, as a way of propping up this movie. Now, I'm sure some of you are in the comments right now talking about how much of a hater I am, as a way of trying to deflect my very valid criticism. And it's happening on X as well, where I also shared my opinion on this matter, and of course someone took what I said completely out of context and just heard what they wanted to hear. Asim said, quote, "Did you want the most successful producer in Hollywood history to use his platform to belittle a filmmaker's work? Regardless of how you feel about Superman, it's a 2.5 out of 5 for me. That's a vile thing to want." Also, Feige has always famously praised DC. And you know what? I'm so glad that this person commented on my post, because it is a perfect representation of the brain dead comments I usually get, even here on this channel. Can someone please explain to me how criticizing a movie, giving an honest opinion on a director's work, is belittling him? I will never understand why people take criticism so personally. To answer your question, no, I didn't expect Kevin Feige to be honest and say anything bad about Superman, because that's just not something that he's going to do. But that doesn't mean that his comments do not also highlight a very real problem facing this genre right now. Criticism is not hate. There is nothing vile about sharing your honest opinion on a Superman movie of all things.
Ultimately, if you're going to have lasting change in anything, you're really talking about just raising your standards.
Y'all be cool. Right on.